Aloha, everybody. Welcome back to the Wall Street Coach podcast. My name is Ann Curtin, and I'm very excited to welcome Matthew Monaco to my podcast. Aloha, Matthew.
Hi, Kim. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure to have you on. Matthew, you have a diverse bio, so I'm going to ask you to have you tell everybody a little bit about where you're coming from with regards to where you are as a trader, the kind of trader you are, and then talk a little bit about the journey that got you here.
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey started 2017. At that time, I was still in college. And so I was studying to be a software engineer. And the way my degree worked was it was a 5-year program because, 4 years of school, and then it was like one full year of paid internship. And that year was kind of split up. So 2017, I was coming off my first paid internship, first working experience in the quote unquote real world as a software engineer. And, the company I was working for was fine. It was just kind of came to the conclusion of, wow, like the idea of doing this for the next 40 or 50 years of my life is pretty daunting. I don't think this is something that I can commit to for that long. So started looking at some other ways to try to figure out how to make some money. And I always was kind of an entrepreneurial style person. So eventually stumbled on trading. And, being a standard college kid, I didn't have much money at the time. So I got started trading with $2,000 back in 2017. Made every mistake in the book, and pretty much in 2017 lost all of that money. And then was pretty frustrated and kind of pushed pause on trading for a little bit. College, etc. Was a pretty full plate, but I never really gave up on that dream. So 2018 to 2019 came around, and I had a couple more of those paid internships. So I had a little bit more money to get started, and the clock really was ticking at that point. I was about to graduate and had a full-time job offer lined up, and I was like, if I have to do this, I will to, I guess, survive, but that's definitely not what I want to do. So I took trading a lot more seriously, and started seeing some success towards the end of 2019 after just putting a little bit more time into trading. And come 2020, 2021, we all know the market was pretty crazy, which with all those opportunities definitely helped me kind of pour some fire on, my success. And it came relatively quickly during that period as my account grew into the millions of dollars. And then since then, still actively trade pretty frequently. 2022 was a bit slower, and 2023 and 2024, my style of trading has changed a little bit. I used to primarily be, long biased, and now I'd say I'm more like 50-50 long and short biased. So still do the bread and butter longs that I've always done. Those just aren't as plentiful, I guess, as they once were. But when they show up, are great opportunities. And now, over the last couple of years, I've definitely spent a lot of my time learning the short side and the strategies of short selling in the stock market, and do both. And well, I mean, the market's really good right now. It was good last year. So it's a pretty good start this year. So nothing to complain about.
Yep. We first met, Matthew and I, in, I guess it was 2017. Was it 2017?
No, it would have been
18?
either end of 2018, early 2019.
Okay.
Right
Okay.
around, life decision time.
Yes, exactly. And I just remember that kind of pivot for you. And I just wonder if you'd speak a little bit about what informed your decision to zig instead of zag with, a very secure full-time position, and then deciding to go towards trading. Because I think there are a lot of traders out there who have to make that decision based on variables that can really cause them a lot of stress, and take that into the trading where they start to operate like I have to, must, should. And I don't think that lends itself to that neutrality. So if you're willing to just share a little bit about that and how you navigated it.
Yeah, definitely. So for some more context, that 2019 period, I had a software engineering job lined up. And I guess by society's measures and everything, it was kind of exactly what, everyone wants. Great first job out of college. The pay was solid, etc. But, it's a standard, 9 to 5. I'd be in the office, I'd be working all the time. And as a result, I definitely would not have been able to trade very much at all, if at all, just because, I was in the office on work computers, etc. So
Yeah.
my access to trading would have basically been zero. So around that time, I there was a couple of factors that definitely all like led to this decision. The first one was I was starting to see some success in 2019.
Mm.
To put a number on it, I think by the end of 2019, I had made 20 or $30,000. So, not a huge amount of money, not even really amount of money you can really live on, but like it was a taste of success
Yeah.
finally, especially after I didn't have much success beforehand. So entering 2020, when that job was, the clock was ticking, I had to accept it. I really was looking and searching for other ways to, how can I, make some money, make,
Yeah.
even if it's not the full salary that I was going to make at the job, if I could make half or 80% of that or something like that, and just had more flexible hours so I could still focus on trading. That was really my goal. So then another opportunity came up, and the pay was less, but obviously I had much more flexible hours and it was remote. So at the time, well, obviously I made the decision to do that, but it wasn't an easy decision at the time because it was completely outside my field. It wasn't as a software engineer. It was more as kind of like a editor, writing content basically about the stock market,
Yeah.
which again, I was pretty passionate about that, but it was a tough decision because I just spent almost 5 years at that point just earning my software engineering degree. I had the job lined up and I talked to my parents about it and they were supportive of whatever decision I made, but I was definitely always kind of like a, I guess, type A person where I got good grades in school. I always kind of did what I was told. So it was definitely like a internal struggle for me to say, like, look, this is everything you've been working towards your whole life, but you're not going to do that. You're going to go over here and make this decision to try to pursue trading. And that was a pretty tough battle, which Kim and I back then we did talk about it quite a bit. But yeah, so then I ended up making that decision, and it allowed me to have that flexibility in the hours, allowed me to spend more time trading, and then kind of work either when the market was slow or early in the morning or in the evening because the hours were more flexible. And honestly, like the stars kind of aligned, but I definitely worked pretty hard to get that scenario. And
Yes.
if anyone wants any advice, like that would be the way to do it. Everyone wants to be a full-time trader. But until you start to see some success, then you get a little more choices out there. Like maybe, you change careers or you take a step back or you find something where, you still have some income to pay the bills. And that
Yes.
also, frees up a lot of emotional stress on the trading side, to like let yourself go out there and be trading. Because if you're trading and you're like, I need to make my rent this month, you're setting yourself up for a disaster.
Yeah. Do you feel that right from the start, because you had that revenue coming in, it allowed you to be patient with yourself, never mind with the experience with the market at the time?
Yeah, it definitely did. You hear a lot of traders talk about, and I agree. You got to kind of be emotionally detached from the money. Because if you're out there, you're looking at your P&L or you're stressed about it, stressed about making or losing money, it interferes with your decision making. So having that income, and again, it was less than if I just would have worked the job, sure, but it allowed me to pay rent and put food on the table. And as a result, I knew I didn't need to make money trading.
Yeah.
I wanted to, obviously, because still the end goal was to
Sure.
become this full-time trader. But it basically bought me time, to the time I needed to really develop those skills, to also make enough money, have enough money in savings to then make that jump. Because making the jump to a full-time trader, it's a pretty big jump, especially if you go straight from full-time job to full-time trader.
Huge.
You're
It's a
0 to 100
huge,
very quick.
huge chasm. Would you be willing to tell us from you starting to part-time trade to the point where you decided to become full-time? Uh, what was it that period of time?
Yeah, so from part-time to full-time,
Yes,
it was a good, probably still almost 2 years, I think, after that point.
that's
I
great.
kept the job basically all through 2020, and I started having a lot of success in 2020. Then 2021, for my trading, I mean, 2021 was my first seven-figure year as a trader, but I did that still all while keeping the job. I was just nervous about going out there and like leaving that income.
Yeah,
Obviously, towards the end of that, I definitely, my work performance started to decline. And then eventually the writing was kind of on the wall where it didn't really make sense for me to continue this with the trading results and success I've had. Obviously, I didn't know if they'd continue. So, left on good terms, etc.
sure.
But yeah,
Yeah.
uh,
So
so it definitely took a while.
would you be able to look back at, let's say, that one trade? I remember there was a blog post about that $100,000 mark. When did you have some sort of aha moment that you felt kind of catapulted you into the level that you're at now?
Yeah, that would have been right around mid 2020. And we briefly talked even before we were on here how surreal the whole thing has been. So I think that was part of why I took it so slow, because it was almost so surreal the whole time, and it was something I had wanted for years at that point, started to see
Yeah.
some success. But there was a period of time in 2020 from I think it was like May to June or July, where I had a ton of success. And I had made multiples of even my software engineering salary at that point in time. And sitting back at that point, I was like, whoa, like this is pretty crazy
Yeah.
to see that success. And you always see other people on the internet do it on Twitter or other social
Yep.
media, and then all of a sudden you're doing it yourself, and you're like, it's pretty surreal. Still, I mean, looking back at from where I was even 5 years ago to today, it is surreal. I will say though, shortly after that, I think July, August, September, if I'm remembering correctly, or maybe July and August, they were pretty dry months for me. I definitely didn't make, like my income from trading those months was less than my salary. So I think because it was, not as consistent as it is now back then, because I was still
Yep.
pretty new,
Yep.
it definitely delayed that decision to make that jump and definitely focus more full time.
When it does, even today, get impacted, when you feel that sense of dry month, red months, what is it that you lean on to cope with it? What did you lean on then to cope with?
Yeah, back then, it was definitely harder for sure because I didn't have the experience I have now. Back then, you look back on your good months, you know what's possible. But for me, it was definitely looking up to other traders and stuff too, and seeing their journey. Someone I looked up to a lot. I'm not sure if you talked to Tim Grittani, but he's everywhere, very popular guy.
For sure.
And he's been doing it now for 10, 15 years, like a decade, and he's had a ton of success pretty much the entire time. And he had some periods of drought, but yet still he has continued to see some success. So early on, I kind of got the motivation, I guess, from other people and seeing
Yep.
those success stories. Nowadays, which just still happens, you go through some dry months. Most recently, for my trading back in October,
Yeah.
I got married in September, big life change. October came around, and sure enough, just to pour some more stuff on the plate, I didn't have a very good month trading, and it was pretty frustrating. But
Yeah.
at that point, you kind of like look back and reflect, and I know at this point the strategies that I use, and I've got the skills. I guess confidence is the answer, where it's like, all right, like let's just reset, go back to the basics. You know
Yep.
what you're doing,
Yep.
and then from there, November, December, and so far January have been pretty good months. So the little down draws in October is a thing of the past, and onwards and upwards at this point. So
Yeah.
that confidence took several years, at least for me, to really build up to that point. Um, yeah.
I think it's so fascinating, confidence, the concept of it, because I do think there is a level of confidence every trader has to even have the guts to sit down and trade. But I also often say there's a certain level of confidence that has to be earned. You don't get to just have confidence. You have to really earn that confidence. Is there a trade or two that comes to mind where you saw yourself earn that confidence?
Yeah. A couple trades I think recently that come to mind, and even, there's some older ones for sure. Uh, in general, the theme I'd say though is, when you have this thesis or this idea on a trade, and then you follow through with it, and you build in the trade correctly, and they obviously end up being some of your bigger trades when they do work out. One example. I can't remember. It was a couple months ago. It was a stock NUKK, which went from, I don't know, a couple dollars a share, like $75 a share in like 2 or 3 days. And I was long biased on that one pretty much the entire time. I had shares from $8. I think I was selling all the way up to $45 a share. And it was the confidence and also the comfortability, if
Yep,
that's a word,
for
to
sure.
sit in the trade and, just lean on that confidence, respect the risk levels. And rather than sitting there looking at my P&L as it got bigger and bigger and bigger, it was more so, kind of just being in a flow state a little bit and watching, and letting the trade work out, saying if it hits this level, I'm out, it's
Yep,
fine, so be it.
yep.
And then as it worked, kind of adjusting the plan and trusting that thesis along the way.
Do you feel that your software engineering background, anytime engineering's involved, there's a bit of a stoicism that's required? Do you feel that stoicism is something that has served you as a trader, just coming from that background?
In some ways, yeah, I mean, I definitely agree personally. For example, software engineers, if there's any out there, we live in like if else statements, which is very similar to trading. If this happens, we do this.
Yes.
And lately, I've definitely been leaning more on my software engineer skills as I've kind of like dipped back into it and played with making some custom stuff here and there, which, still work in progress, but I think will help my trading in the long term. Is also a fun project to work on the side
Yeah.
because, any full-time trader out there knows there's some days where it's just super boring. And if I
Yeah.
sit in front of the market on those boring days, I can guarantee you I'll lose money. So if I go out there and I have a different side project, something I can work on, that in itself helps. I will say though too, I don't think it comes from my engineering. I think there's also like a level of degeneracy in all traders as well, a little bit, some bigger than others. And every now and then, for me, that degeneracy will come out. And usually when that happens, it's a bad thing. But I think it's just like that evil monster sitting there for most people, just
So
waiting
speak
to
to
escape.
that. Speak to what that looks like or how it shows up for you. And thanks for saying that because, you are a teacher and a mentor to so many. And I think sometimes everybody puts their best foot forward, but I love how honest you are all the time about the
Yeah.
difficulty. So speak about what degeneracy even means. I mean, that word was very popular a few years ago. I know there's a lot of traders who still use it to self-describe the whole industry, but what does it mean for you?
Yeah, so typically, I guess for me, when it comes out, every day you build your watch list, you got your game plan, and I'll tell you every single time when I follow my game plan, win, lose, draw, it's just always better. The wins are bigger, the losses are smaller,
Yeah,
because you built your game plan, you put a lot of thought process into it, and if you follow it, and I was perfect, life would be pretty good. But all because the market got so hot, especially recently, it snuck out a little bit where there's so many opportunities, so many trades moving across the board. And then all of a sudden, for me, I'll find myself in positions where it's like I'm trying to grab them all or grab as many as possible. And then all of a sudden you're in some trades or you're looking at opportunities and, you look back and you're like, why did I even do that? This wasn't part of my plan. It's kind of a spur of the moment thing. And because so much was moving, I guess it's a little FOMO, fear of missing out. You try to go out there and you try to capture some stuff that's outside your wheelhouse or, traders like to say outside your playbook. And yes, most of the time, and then the worst is too, right? Is you get a little degenerate, you win a couple, and then all of a sudden you feel like you can do anything. And then reality comes smacking back down for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, for sure. And I think this idea of you having a side hustle is just a brilliant strategy to not have that happen too often because it is allowing you to not be bored. It is allowing you to keep your creative juices flowing, which I could see being really critically important for the traders out there who are really strategic and smart. It's almost like you could over trade just because you want to problem solve. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
No, no, I definitely agree. And that's something that's relatively new for me, if I'm being honest. And can't remember if it was you or Brian Lee. You guys were both on stage at the Traders for a Cause conference back in October of
Yeah.
24.
Yeah.
And you guys were talking about just like life balance and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you and I previously have talked about too, like if you get your fulfillment or your dopamine hits just from trading, well,
Yeah.
what's going to happen?
Yeah.
You're just going to trade
Yeah.
all day, every day.
Exactly.
Versus if you got some balance in life or you got some good hobbies or some other good projects or some reasons to get off your screen and like that's your, ideally your main source of fulfillment.
Yeah.
Well, then all of a sudden, if you look at the market, and it's not that you don't love trading, don't get me
Right.
wrong, it's
Right.
just you're like, oh, well, there's nothing to do today, or like there's no trade setting up. Well, then you don't feel obligated to sit there all day, stare at your screen, you're going
That's
to
right.
go do, whatever your hobby, side hustle, etc., is on the side. Yeah, so that's something I've
What?
been working towards pretty much since that conference back in October.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah.
It was a great conversation, and Brian always brings such great questions to those, fireside chats.
Mhm.
Um, what do you do now with regards to your having shifted from long bias to short bias, including that more often? And just speak a little bit about what if there is a trader who's hearing this conversation and they've been debating whether or not to switch strategies? What are some of the checklist items you would recommend they first make sure they've achieved before they start to move in a different direction?
Yeah, I mean, starting from the very beginning, like if this trader's new, the best approach, and this was something that helped lead to my success too, is you really need to get one strategy down before you do anything. And if you're new and you've been trying a strategy for a while and you are being disciplined, you're not just doing random other stuff, and you're still not making money, well, there's a chance that maybe that strategy just doesn't work. But what you'll see with a lot of successful traders, and especially in the beginning, I studied a lot of those traders who are public about it and their journeys and shared it. Like in the beginning, they master one thing, allows them to start building confidence, building their trading account, seeing that success. And then after doing that for a while, generally speaking in trading, strategies go in and out of style. So I would do that for, keep milking it as long as there's milk to be milked.
Yes.
But if then all of a sudden you start noticing like, hey, my strategy that was happening every day is only happening once or twice a week, or so, well, now you got some spare time. So rather than force something, then at that point, start learning something new. And that was kind of, my approach. Most of my first 2 years of trading, I did the same like one or two things, same one or two strategies. And then all of a sudden, it just started happening less and less and less. And it's pretty much been stable since. They still happen, it's just a couple times a
Yep.
week, maybe.
Yep.
So then I started looking into other strategies because I also had more time to do that. And you just do the same cycle over again. At first, if you like paper trade it. I think Brian also, he says a lot of really smart, good
He
things.
does. He
But he
does.
talks about forward testing too, and I like that concept where you have a strategy, and rather than going back and back testing it, you just say, okay, this is my hypothetical strategy. Like, as the days go by, like in real time, do that strategy. And whether you're trading super small, risking like a very amount of money, just so that way you can get your feet wet, or you're paper trading it, either way is fine. But then after, a couple of weeks of seeing that, you're going to say, oh, like the strategy works or it doesn't. And if it does work, then just, slowly start sizing up, very similar to, how you did it with that original strategy you had. And then over the years, and I do think it takes years, and trading's a skill. We've seen traders do this
Yep.
successfully for decades,
Yep.
where, now maybe I've got 3, 4, 5 strategies that I use confidently and consistently. But in 5 more years, that might be 10 or 15 as it just like slowly builds over time. A lot of traders, and, I've been at fault of this several times too. You just go in there, you try to do everything. And, if you're trying to do everything, you're gonna mess everything up. So get
Yeah.
some confidence with one, see that success, and then slowly expand that over time.
So I recently was lucky to have Bryce Tui on the podcast, and he talked as well about how he had recently changed his strategy. Um, Curious if you both decide this. I know you're friends,
Mhm.
and I'm just curious, did you both talk about this with each other, challenge each other with this? Did one start and then you decided to both do it? If that's something you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah. So Bryce and I are still close friends. We talk every day. Usually in the morning, we try to hop on the phone with each other roughly around the market or, in like a voice chat in Discord or whatever.
Yep.
So yeah, Bryce and I talk a lot, and I think we kind of came to the same relative conclusion at the same time. Because him and I, we don't trade exactly the same, but the setups that I do on the long side, he does very similar, just some small tweaks and slightly different. But it's the same, big picture setup. So yeah, about a year, 18 months, 2 years ago, whenever it was, we started being like, okay, if you look at all the biggest of the big traders, at least the ones who are public, right? A lot of them in the small cap space, they're short sellers. They're short sellers for a reason,
Yep.
was kind of the thought. And then as a result, it was like, okay, let's see what's here. And clearly there's something here. If all these people are doing this, there's clearly, an edge to make some money. So let's try to do it as well. And yeah, it's nice having someone like Bryce, or everyone should have someone like their Bryce, where you can just bounce ideas off each other, hold each other accountable through the ups and the downs. We've got a pretty good non-competitive relationship. So even if my wins are bigger, his wins are bigger, etc., it's not so much like that. We kind of work as a team, even though,
Yeah.
I'm trading my money, he's trading his, to
Yeah.
just try to find the setups.
Yep. And to be a
And
sounding
huge.
board off of
The
each
sounding
other.
board, yeah.
And this was definitely me leading to this point because to me, that feels like the ideal way a trader gets that support, encouragement, because you both can appreciate, understand the highs, the lows,
Yeah.
and to not. So I really wanted to just ask you, do you feel that friendship alone has been impactful in the trajectory? You guys hit it off, seemed pretty early. And you can tell just the banter in your podcasts and your sessions, even seeing you guys at Traders for Cause, like you can finish each other's sentences sometimes. So I want to just have you talk a little bit about, am I correct about this? And is this something that you would encourage other traders to try to create for themselves, a tight relationship?
No, definitely. Networking in general is, I think, one of the biggest keys to my success. When I was getting started and started to see that success, I grew pretty close to Jack Kellogg, Kyle Williams. A lot of these guys, have had crazy success out there in the market.
Yeah.
But when I found them, Jack was, I don't know, around six figures in total trading, and he's blown up to millions and millions. Kyle was around a similar point as well. Like, in the grand schemes of trading, they were relatively small. And so I started chatting with them, and, we met through Twitter and chat rooms, and, we just all kind of learned a lot from each other. And that speeds up your learning curve too. And still great friends with them. But Bryce and I, we talk, like I said, pretty much every day. And I do think that helps in a lot of ways too, because it also pushes you to be a trader. It pushes you to, learn new things or size up on other trades as well. It's pretty easy to become a little complacent a little bit and just kind of like let things coast, rather than constantly trying to improve.
Yep.
So yeah,
Yep.
having that trading pod, that's, a term, the trading pods, it
Yeah.
is huge. And if no one has one, just start reaching out to people. Odds are, everyone's trying to figure it out. And
Exactly.
the best thing that can happen is you find where someone is roughly where you are, maybe even slightly a little above where you are right there. And
Yep.
then, you can learn from them and push yourself, and it'll also push them to, improve their trading.
I think it's a lonely journey. And to
It
do
is.
it without support, encouragement on the hard days, and even on the great days. Like,
Mhm.
who could, the days you do really well and you want to just brag about, like, oh my God, I did this much today. If you don't have someone who has that in context to what it costs to get there, who can you share it with? So I just think that is something I wish more traders considered. So,
No, definitely agree. Trading is lonely and odd, you know? Like if you try to talk to anyone else about trading, they're not going to understand.
no,
They just won't get it.
no,
So definitely having someone in the trading community and a trader, that can just also hold you accountable too. If you do
exactly.
something dumb,
Totally.
Bryce will tell me I'm doing something dumb,
Correct.
you
You
know?
get you get to just hold each other accountable to what
Mhm.
you both know. You're both helping each other up level and strive to be better by being, and I loved what you said about the relationship, that there isn't this competitiveness. It's more about having each other's back, which I think is just really powerful. So I'm
Yeah.
happy for both of you that you both have each other. And I hope it encourages more traders to do it. So we're going to go on X Space in a few minutes. What I want to ask is if you're willing to tell us the worst trade you ever took and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, a couple come to mind. One happened pretty early on in my trading. I can't remember, sometime in 2019. Basically, I had made $5,000 or $6,000 up to that point in the year. And then all of a sudden I found myself in, it's not a stock anymore, but Slack is work.
Mhm.
WORK was the ticker. I think they got bought by somebody. But I was in that stock for no real reason. I didn't really have a strategy. I don't really even know what I was doing. And all of a sudden, 2, 3 days go by, I refused to sell it, and it ballooned the loss, got worse and worse and worse. So I lost like $5,000 or $6,000 on the trade, which for me was it was like all my profits up to the year at that point. And that was definitely a big turning moment because I took a couple days off from trading at that point because I was so pissed. And then I realized, if you're gonna be a successful trader, like that's just unacceptable. You just can't do that. You can't have those big losses, especially something just completely outside of the strategies that you do. So that was a good reminder to get disciplined. So percent wise, obviously that was like my biggest percent of my
Mhm.
account loss ever up until that point. And every couple of months and something I'm constantly working on to try to get better. I'll have a bigger than normal loss, and I'll tell you every time I'll look back on it and be like, what were you doing? Like, this isn't really, this wasn't an edge. This wasn't a strategy that, you're highly proficient in. So why was it so big? Why did you take such big size or, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So, when I was starting shorting too, back, I think this might have been last June or something. I want to say the stock was like SNPX or SGNPX, something along those lines.
Mhm.
Big squeezer, and I had lost like again like 20 grand on that, which for my account's not as big, but like that's a big loss for me. I don't really have losses that are that big. I like to keep my losses smaller than that. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, there's clearly a strategy here, but when you were wrong, you just let the loss get bigger. Like you're being stupid. So it's every now and then, no one likes those losses, but for me, it's always a reminder of like, all right, let's buckle down the hatches, let's get
Yes.
disciplined, and get back. So, when you look back, they're just little dips in your overall profit curve. And obviously, if I could eliminate those dips, my life would be easier. But
For
sometimes
sure.
the degeneracy comes out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Last question. What is the most surprising thing that you have learned about trading or about yourself in this trading journey of yours? What was the most unexpected? Whoa.
Yeah, I think the one that comes to mind right now is when you're trading good, you're following your rules. Trading is incredibly not stressful when you're doing it the right way.
Mhm.
I find myself very stressed when I'm doing everything wrong.
Wow.
So if all of a sudden it's like, noon or 1 o'clock and, you take your little midday break and I'm sitting there, I'm like, today was a good day. It almost feels easy. And that's the way that trading should be because that means you're following your rules, you're doing your strategy. Everything was, within the window of what you expected, win or loss. And yeah, if you find yourself being really stressed, I find that I'm doing something wrong.
Such good advice.
Yeah.
Matthew, thank you so much for coming on my podcast. We'll do part 2 over on X Space now. And I hope everybody listens to these very powerful words of wisdom from Matthew Monaco. Thank you for being here, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I hope you have subscribed to the Wall Street Coach podcast. And if you haven't, it's time to do so. See you on the next podcast.